To be talking about backing up your system, the importance of that. We're going to talk about things you need to take into consideration when you're buying new hardware, getting a new server, new workstations, and then also talk a little bit about upgrades. And then also, as Dee Dee mentioned, we'll talk a little about antivirus and kind of tie that into the backup situation. So normally how we would have presented this would be to be talking about your hardware first, but because of many recent events with our clients and this horrible ransomware that seems to be going around, we're going to start talking about backups first. So as we begin talking about backups, one of the things that we have found is that when there is a situation where either you have a complete hardware failure, you get hit by a virus, and kind of more specifically a crypto locker virus, where it basically you can't access your Sage, or what you can access, you get error messages, and it's the ransomware, so they want you to pay them in order to unlock your files, is that we have found that at least 75% of the clients that we have dealt with that have encountered this unfortunate situation did not have a good backup. They thought they had a good backup, but they did not. So we're going to kind of talk about backup strategies and what you should really take into consideration with those backups. So the first thing that we want to talk about is that you should be regularly backing up your entire Mass 90 directory. Now, I know the product now is called Sage 100. It still defaults most of the time to a folder called Mass 90, which is under the Sage folder. So you should be backing everything up, not just your data. You want to be backing up your program files, your system files, and your data files, backing all of those up. The second bullet point that we have here is that we do not recommend that you do incremental backups. A lot of IT personnel will say, well, we'll just do an incremental backup, and should something happen, we'll just back up from the last incremental backup, which basically tracks your changes. With that, you run the risk of, if you have to do a total restore, that you are not going to have all of the files there, and it's not going to be the latest backup. So please do not, just avoid incremental backups, period. We recommend that you do a backup every single night. Now, I know that a lot of people, you know, it's inconvenient if you don't have an IT staff or an automatic backup. You're manually having to back up your system. Maybe there's a lot of data. But if you ever have a situation, a catastrophic failure of your server, or a situation with a bad virus, it will be well worth whatever you invest in order to be able to get a good and complete backup on a nightly basis. And then do not assume that your backup system is working. As I mentioned a minute ago, we found that about 75% of our clients recently that had a situation did not have a good backup. And that could have been where somebody, their last backup was a couple of weeks ago. So what that means is that they're rekeying information from the last 2 weeks. We've had some that hadn't had a good backup for months, and we had some that had no backup at all. They thought someone was doing the backup, or they assumed that the backup system that they had in place was working, and it wasn't. So it was very critical and detrimental to their business, and ended up costing them a lot of money to recover from that situation. The other thing that you want to consider when you're talking to your IT person about a backup is there are places where, other than that Mass 90 folder, where you may be storing data. An example of that would be if you're using paperless Office. Sometimes individuals have the paperless documents being saved to a different location. They may have alternate directories, which means that you could be your Sage software could be installed in one location, but you're actually saving your data to a completely different location. So you need to know that so that when you make sure you're doing a backup, you are capturing all of the information. And on alternate directories, this will show you where to look to see if you are having, if you have alternate directories set up, and also if you're storing your payroll data in a different location. So some individuals store their payroll data in a different location so that it can't be accessed by employees or somebody actually get in, maybe get into it and try to write some reports. So if you want to know all of the different places where you can check, you can refer back to this this PowerPoint, which we will have this recording posted to our website, or you can feel free to call our support department and we'll be glad to go through the information with you. Okay. The final line of defense is a strategy for restoration. So that's what you really need to think about. You're going to talk to your IT folks about, do we get backups? What's the frequency? Make sure you're not doing incremental backups, but take that to the most important step, and that is, what is our process if we have to restore? And so what you should do is you should work with your IT support team to establish a sound recovery method. And then it's always good to maybe work with Oasis and say, okay, this is what our IT is recommending for our recovery method. Do you see any issues with this? We're gonna know things that your IT may not, such as, are you using third-party products that are add-ons to your Sage 100, and maybe they're installed in a different place. When you do a restore, you have to restore everything. So we're going to know things of that nature. We can also kind of point them in a direction and look for certain things. We also suggest a rolling 7 days of full backups. So what some people do is they have one method of backing up, and they use that same media every night. So last night I backed up, and then so today then I'm going to back up again. And I'm overwriting everything from a daily basis. So should that media fail and you need to restore and you didn't realize that your jump drive or your tape drive was bad, then you're kind of out of luck. Also, depending on the timing of the backup, you may not be able to use that to restore from. So if you're doing it for 7 days, then you have a much better recovery, a much better chance of only losing up to 1 week's worth of work versus several weeks or several months. When you're backing up the system, you need to make sure that everyone is logged out of the system, because you want to make sure that there are no files that are locked that won't get backed up because they're locked. So everyone needs to be out of the system. And that's just a good practice, not even related to backup, but at the end of every day, everyone should be exiting out of your Sage 100. They should not be leaving anything open. They should completely close out. So, it says, obviously there are exceptions to this rule based on the size of your database, the dollars involved, the timing, but really, take a look at a comprehensive strategy. And I understand it can be an overwhelming process, but if you think of it in terms about, okay, if I come in tomorrow and my Sage system is gone, my accounting information is gone, what am I going to do? Am I going to be able to recover from that? So if you think about it from kind of the worst case scenario, it helps justify the cost or anything involved in that.
Pam?
Yes.
We do have a question.
Okay.
The question is, what have been the principal shortcomings of the backup strategy of the clients who have found they were not prepared for the ransomware or other data control issues? Have these folks been backing up daily, but it just wasn't effective?
Thank you for that question. What we found is that in most of these instances, the clients assumed that they had a good backup, and most of them thought that they were backing up daily. In maybe one instance, they were doing incremental backups, but what they found, and then we also had another instance, I believe, where someone was backing up over the same media every night and not having several days worth of backups. So it really has been a combination, but I think in almost every instance is that the client, which normally we're working with the accounting manager or the controller, they assumed or thought that they were getting, that IT was getting a good backup of the system. And it just wasn't happening. Now, that's not, I'm not trying to throw anyone's IT department under the bus. It could be a variety of reasons. You know, they assumed that the backup was working. Maybe the controller, because they're not an IT professional in most instances, didn't, if IT said, hey, can we do an incremental backup, they're thinking, well, you're doing some kind of a backup, so I'm sure that has to be okay. So it really was pretty much every scenario that you could think of, but most of it boiled down to maybe, especially if you have internal IT or companies that don't really have internal IT, and, you know, Joe has always been responsible for getting the backup done. Joe quit, so we just assumed that somebody was going to let his replacement know that their responsibility was to back up the system, but no one passed that along. So there was just a lot of different things that resulted in, you know, from falling through the cracks. I will tell you that we have had a couple of clients over the past year actually pay the ransom to get their data unlocked, so to speak, and it was not 100% effective. There were still files that were locked and files that were damaged, and even though they paid the ransomware, the work that was involved in trying to, you know, pull everything back together still ended up costing them a lot of money. So can you let me know? That was a long-winded answer. I apologize, but does that answer their question, Petey?
I think it does. It also has led into another question, which is, should their IT support speak with Oasis technical support to validate their recovery methodology?
Yes, yes, and that's, yes. We would recommend that. They obviously don't have to, but for peace of mind, then yes, that would be a good idea for them to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. All right. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is kind of actually what I had just mentioned is to, you know, we're not trying to be alarmist, but you really need to make sure that you're prepared for the worst case scenario. And so again, you know, using these questions, talk with your IT person, or, you know, if you don't have an IT person, you know, a lot of smaller companies, they're basically doing everything themselves. So, you know, any advice that we can share with you, just let us know. Okay. All right. The next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about new workstations or new servers. And one of the things that I cannot stress enough is that, you know, technology changes constantly. And when you are getting new workstations, you're having to get a new server. Typically, we have to get one every few years. You should always check with Oasis first and in advance of any new hardware. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that what you're purchasing is compatible and is supported with your Sage 100, especially if you happen to be running an older version of Sage 100 or Mass 90. So one of the things that we would, what you should do is, contact our support team, say, hey, we're looking at getting a new server, we're getting bids, what do we need to make sure that we're what we're looking for. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send you then a supported platform matrix. And what that matrix will show you is there's a separate matrix for each version, and whether you're on the standard version, advanced, or premium. And it's going to go through and it's going to show you what operating systems are supported. It's going to show you what type of workstations are supported versus, Windows 7 Professional, but it's going to let you know that Windows 7 Home Edition is not supported. So it's going to go through. So what you should do is you should get a copy of this document, and we'll ask you what version you're running. Now, if you're running a really old version and you haven't updated for, probably the new technology is not going to be supported by Sage. Does that mean it won't work? No, not necessarily. It may work just fine on the new technology, but what it does mean is that if you did have any issues with that newer technology, Sage would not be able to support you if you started having issues. They would basically say, version 4.5 is a retired version. It's not supported on a Windows 2012 server, so they need to upgrade. So it's better to prepare in advance. Let me go back a second. What I'm going to show you is real quickly, I'm going to just show you a sample of one of the matrix. And this one that I've pulled up is for the Sage 100 Advanced, which used to be known as Mass 200. And basically this document is going to provide details about workstations. It's going to provide details about servers. It'll have special notes that will be meaningful to your IT vendor. It has recommendations. It's also very specific about what's not supported. So it goes through and gives you a variety of information. It talks about virtual platforms. We're seeing a lot more customers wanting to go to a virtual platform. And then it has just a whole section of miscellaneous notes. So it's very important that you share this with your IT person. Sage's position is if a particular configuration is not listed on this matrix, it is considered unsupported. So if they go, well, Windows 2018 just came out, can I go ahead and install, can I move to that server? If it has not been formally tested by Sage and documented that it's supported, then it would be considered unsupported. So I just kind of wanted to show you that document and what that looks like. So that pretty much talks about what you need to do in order to move a server. What we ask you not to do is not to give us a call one morning and say, hey, our IT people are here to put in a new server, because there are things that that require preparation. For instance, maybe you have third-party products, and we need to make sure that all of those get installed properly. We need to confirm the current version of Sage that you're running what service update or service pack you're on. So there's several things that need to happen, and we just want to make sure that we plan and that we can have everything ready for you in order to be of assistance when you do have that move. So if you're thinking about it, just give our support team a call. They'll be glad to provide you with the current matrix. Now the one that I'm showing here is for version 2016. So let's say that you happen to be running the 2015 version, which is also, I think, 5.2. We will send you that matrix. So there's a matrix for each version of Sage. So are there any questions about that? Okay. One thing I'd like to do is I want to back up just a moment because we were talking about backups themselves, and I wanted to touch base a little bit on antivirus. You know, it's kind of counterintuitive to be having a discussion about antivirus issues and how it may affect Sage at the same time that we're talking about making sure that you have good backups in case you get hit by, you know, ransomware. So how I'm going to leave that as far as antivirus is concerned is if you start experiencing performance issues with your Sage 100 being extremely slow, there's a lot of lag in it, maybe it's across the board and all of the users are having that situation. Maybe it's just your workstation that's having the situation, but you recently got a new workstation. One of the first things that we're going to have you check is your antivirus. You know, antivirus can be set up to scan every time you access a file. So if you're accessing accounts payable data entry program from the server and it's scanning it before it opens it, that can cause your system to slow down. So if you run into issues like that, what we do is we recommend that you call our tech support team, and we will make some recommendations on excluding the Sage files from your scan. And we will give you the file extensions and let you set up the exclusions on your antivirus software. And those do need to be set up at the workstation level and at the server level. So if you're not experiencing performance issues, then by all means we would not recommend that you have any exclusions listed or set up. But if you are experiencing performance issues, then let us know. And we'll be glad to provide you that information. So again, just kind of touching base on the antivirus, and then you can just let me know if you have any additional questions about the antivirus. So Dee Dee, I'm just going to ask if there's any other questions about hardware or the supported platform matrix before we move to the next step in talking about upgrades.
No, it doesn't appear there are right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. One of the things that you need to be aware of in planning maybe for budgets for 2017 or budgets for 2018 is determining when you need to upgrade your Sage 100 software. Many of our users want to upgrade every time a new version is released so that they can take advantage of the latest and greatest enhancements and modifications that have been made to the Sage 100 software. Others tend to maybe want to upgrade every couple of years. So it's really up to you and depends on your budget and whether or not you're wanting to take advantage of the new features as they're released. But it is important to know if the version you're running is going to be retired by Sage. So typically what Sage will do, as you can see from this information, is that they used to support the current version and one version back, which would mean that typically they would have supported the 2016 version, which is also 5.3, and one version back, which is the 2015 version, or 5.2. They now support the current version and two versions back. So the version 2013 just retired September 30th. I'm sorry, I keep losing my mouse here. It retired September 30th of 2016. So what that means to you as an end user is that if you are on that version, Sage will not be putting out any year-end updates, interim releases. They will not be providing tax table updates if you use the payroll module. If there are any updates to any forms or anything related to year-end, that will not be made available in the 2013 version, which is also known as the 5.0. We typically send out information at least a year in advance, and then subsequent emails throughout the year to let everyone know if their version is going to be retiring and that they need to plan for an upgrade. If you'll notice, the next version to be retired is the 2014, which is also the 5.1 version, and it will be officially retired by Sage in September of 2017. But this will be the last year that you get any tax table updates or any year-end updates for your version. So you'll get, if you're using payroll, you're going to get tax table updates for the first quarter of 2017. Any changes that come after the first quarter of 2017, they will not make those available in your version, and you would have to actually manually make those changes if you needed to. So you can see then in 2018, the version 2015 will be retiring, and then subsequently, if they continue with how they've done it for the past several years, in 2019, the 2016 version will be retiring. So what I would suggest is that you take a look to see what version that you're running. How you would do that is you would open your Sage and go up to Help and About, and it will let you know what version you're running. And if you see that you're on a version 5.0 or lower, and especially critical if you're using the payroll module, you need to let us know, and I'm going to show you in a minute how to request an upgrade. I will let you know that at this point, we pretty much are booked with upgrades through the end of the year. So we can work in a few critical upgrades if you have the payroll module. If you do not have the payroll module, we would like to go ahead and start the pre-upgrade analysis process, and then we would start upgrading you after we get through year-end in early February. So just kind of keep that in mind, and then also to keep in mind, which I believe is on the next slide here, is down at the bottom, is that lead time normally is about 4 weeks for an upgrade. Obviously, because we're approaching year end, it's lengthier. But if you have any custom programming or any custom modifications, that will increase your lead time by about 6 to 8 weeks. So you also need to be aware of that as well. So if you decide that you do need to upgrade, and what you need to do then is you need to email Dee Dee, and this is her email address, and let her know that you would like to request an upgrade. She will send you the current and applicable supported platform matrix so that you can share that with your IT to determine if your current system is compatible with the latest version, and also an upgrade request form. And then at that point, once you complete that form, she forwards it to me, and then I'll be in touch to schedule the pre-upgrade analysis. I will let you know that Sage will be releasing the 2017 version before the end of the year. Initially, they had indicated it was going to be in October, and now they're pushing it out a little bit later in the year. Just to let you know, as always, we do not install a brand new release right away. We give it a couple of months to make sure if there are any issues that are found after the initial release that Sage has the opportunity to get those fixed before we start installing for our client base. So we also do a lot of internal testing on our own to make sure that we're comfortable with the release before we roll it out to our client base. So let's say that they release it in December of this year. Then I would anticipate that barring any issues with that release, and typically it's very minor things that they have to fix, we would probably start installing that in March of 2017. So this is how you request an upgrade. And Does anybody have any questions, Dee Dee, about upgrades?
No, they don't.
Okay, thank you. So kind of in summary for what we've talked about today, for your takeaways from today, is number one, you need to immediately check with your IT department and discuss your backup process. What's being done, what do they assume is being done, and how to get that back on track. Then you need to develop a solid recovery strategy and then test that strategy. So if you know what you're going to do to recover from a catastrophic issue, you know, having it written down is the first step, but then actually testing it, you know, what happens if that happens, let's do a restore and let's see what happens, you know, on a test system or another server, and just make sure that what you're thinking will work will work. Always plan and schedule in advance any purchases of any new hardware, workstations or server, and always request a copy of the supported platform matrix in advance so that you make sure that what you're purchasing is supported and applicable. And then take a look at your current version of Sage and see, number one, if you're using payroll, if you have a critical issue and you're still on the 2013 version, or if you're going to need to plan an upgrade in 2017. So, and then kind of the final takeaway where we really concentrated on the backup is to really not think about it in terms of a backup strategy, but to think about it in terms of a recovery strategy. So that pretty much concludes what we wanted to talk about today. So I'll open it up for just a minute to see if there are any additional questions or comments. And if there are none, then we'll go ahead and conclude our webinar for today. And would like to thank everyone that attended.
Okay, Pam, it looks like there are no questions at this time. So I just want to remind everybody about our upcoming webinars. We do have a Sage HRMS webinar on November 3rd at 11 a.m., as well as another Sage 100 Tips and Tricks. Our topic next month is inventory management, and it is on November 15th at 11 a.m. And then we wanted everyone to know that year-end webinars are being planned at this time, and we'll have the schedule out soon. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for those webinars, and we appreciate you taking the time today to join us. So thank you, Pam, and thank you everybody that came on today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.